One thing that resonated with me in this training was the idea that like looking at social media and technology use in terms of like vegetables and candy or like vegetables and junk food. And, I think we saw this a lot during COVID of like, people working from home or kids, doing school virtually. Those are vegetables. You need to be, on the screen. Candy or the junk food is that continuous scroll just because you're bored.
Welcome to another episode of Mental Health in the Age of the Metaverse. I'm your host, Christian Ulstrup. My guest today is Dr. Nikki Lacherza Drew. Dr. Nikki is a counseling psychologist and entrepreneur. She is the founder of Vici Psychological Care, a private practice in New Jersey where she works with children, adolescents, and adults, not only in New Jersey, but also in New York, Florida, and Vermont. She also has an unusual knack for digital marketing and technology, including virtual reality, which she uses to both grow her practice and serve clients in new and interesting ways. Dr. Nikki, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, first question, how long have you been in private practice?
So I started my private practice in the spring of 2019 after leaving a great private group practice. Previously I had worked in like a school setting and a community mental health agency, but I went fully on my own in 2019.
In 2019, so right before the pandemic.
Right before the pandemic, yes. It was interesting.
And were you primarily seeing clients in person?
I was. So I was probably about 75% in person, 25% online and virtual. I feel like at that point, not that many people were used to online therapy. So they really didn't think it was like as effective. It was just new. They didn't know about it. So I only saw about 25% of my caseload online. And then when the pandemic hit, I'm grateful that I already had my feet wet into online therapy because the transition was very smooth. I went 100% online March 2020 through June 2021. And then I went back in person to kind of test it out for about 6 months and found that people just like the convenience of online therapy. So in January 2022, I made the decision to go 100% virtual again.
And that's a big deal for mental health professionals, right? Because I think it was low double digits, maybe like 10% of mental health pros were doing online therapy before the pandemic.
Yeah, there wasn't that many of us. I'm fortunate and grateful that I don't accept insurance. So I really didn't have that loop that loophole to go through. That it was just kind of like, these are my rates, I will give you a super bill, and it's kind of on you to speak to your insurance company to see if it's covered. And so again, like when the pandemic happened, I already had everything in place, and it was just, here are questions to ask your insurance company. If they don't, accept online therapy, you and I can work something out financially.
Well, that's excellent too, because it lowers the barrier to starting a private practice or, going independent. For folks who are willing to take that dive into doing virtual care. I know there are a lot of therapists who, definitely want to start their own private practice at some point. And now that you've done it, I'm curious if you have any advice for those therapists who might be listening, who are thinking about starting their own private practice. What are some things that they should be thinking about before they take the dive?
I would definitely say, collaborate and network with other providers who are already in private practice. For me personally, I went through all this schooling to get my doctorate, and I never once took a business class or a marketing class. It just wasn't part of the program. So, I was fine clinically, but I had no idea the first thing about opening up my own business, the paperwork I needed. So networking with other people who were already in private practice, they kind of helped steer me in a direction to start. And then from there, I was like, okay, these are the other people I need to reach out to. This is the information I need to build my own practice. So it was kind of like invaluable information and advice. And also just, even now, 2022, I still reach out to those people, and they're a great referral source. They're great for, consultation and collaborating. So if you don't have the business and marketing experience, use your network to your advantage.
And are there any particular communities that you would recommend or groups?
I definitely would. The Teletherapist Network is a great place to start. The founder, Catherine, I believe, and I hope she's listening and correct me if I am wrong, that she founded the network during COVID because, private practice can be really lonely, especially if you are virtual only. You don't have an office you're going to and seeing colleagues. So she had founded the network as a place for that. And everybody is great there. It's different licenses, different states, different countries. So you can kind of like throw out a question and everybody will chime in. It's constructive criticism as needed. It's warm, it's friendly, and just say, hey, consider this. And it's not just like a community where, you're not getting feedback. You're getting the feedback and it's an equal give and take. You get out of it what you put into it. So I would definitely recommend that.
Well, I think in a time where people are very concerned about the negative impact of technology, it sounds like there are some positive use cases as well. And this is a good segue, I think, to something I mentioned at the beginning, which is you're quite savvy with digital marketing and social media. Most therapists, doing the private practice thing, I think, is already a big step. And then putting yourself online and understanding how to use some of these channels to grow the business and connect with clients, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a second. That's even a sort of a further step in terms of expertise. What have you learned as you've started marketing your services online and using social media to grow your private practice?
It's definitely been an experience. There's lots of trial and error. There are still things that I have no idea. Like people will say, oh, I'm doing XYZ. And I'm like, I don't even know what that is. So lots of trial and error. Where I was in 2019, social media wise, is very different than where I am now. Don't be afraid to take risks. I've tried different things. I recently started doing reels and it's so awkward in the beginning and uncomfortable. And I hate seeing like my photo and myself on video, but they're quirky. They're quick little things that people like to see. And it's a nice way to get some psychoeducation out there. People are scrolling and they might not necessarily want to stop and read, a huge long post, but they'll watch a video.
Mm-hmm. So you're really meeting some of those people where they are.
Exactly. Meeting them where they're at, being across different social media platforms. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. I will say a majority of the feedback I get is from Instagram. I just think that's where, so many people are at. I haven't dove into the TikTok realm. It's on my to-do list. I don't understand TikTok. It is on my to-do list to figure out. But, taking those risks, seeing what works for you, following other, mental health providers and see what they're doing. And again, see what works for you and your clientele.
And as you've begun using social media more as a part of the business, have you developed any habits or structured your work in a way that you can continue to maintain a healthy relationship with these channels? Because I know it's very tempting to, you start getting the likes and everything else to just get totally sucked in. So how do you manage that?
Agreed. So I schedule all my posts. I pick one day at the end of each month. So like this month, I'll pick one day that I sit down and I schedule out the post one a day for the following month. Mm-hmm. Sometimes there's more than one a day, but I make sure that I'm at least posting one a day. And that's just like a standard post. Reels, same thing. I do them ahead of time and I post them every other day just because they're a lot more work than regular posts. So I set aside time to make sure I do that. And with the business, I did what I do with my personal social media usage. It's on my phone. The apps that I need to have are on my phone, but I don't allow myself to easily access them. Like I have to scroll through my phone to find the apps. And once they're posted, I will check to make sure like any comments are appropriate throughout the day. I usually check like 2 or 3 times a day. But other than that, I really try not to look at, how many likes am I getting? What are the comments saying? And not going down that spiral of like, I'm only doing this for the likes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that word spiral really resonates because I think that's a common trend. You can spiral up, which is great if you're hooked into, good vibes and being creative and having healthy relationships. But I think, unfortunately, there's the dark side, which is you can spiral downward. Now, this is a topic I think that's top of mind for a lot of folks. It's appearing in the media. The New York Times is running a series on technology's impact on mental health. Jonathan Haidt recently published a piece, I think, in the Atlantic, the author of The Coddling of the American Mind, about the negative impact on, social media, especially when it comes to adolescent girls. Was sort of a big focus. Now, you're really on the front lines when it comes to mental health, when it comes to tech use, given the broad range of clientele who you work with. What are you seeing out in clinical practice? What's been the effect of technology?
I hate technology sometimes. When it comes to mental health issues, I do work with a lot of kids and a lot of teens and even adults. But I'm seeing more of the issues with kids and teens. And like you pointed out, especially adolescent females, their self-esteem is plummeting with social media. Their anxiety is skyrocketing. Their depressive symptoms are worsening because they are looking for those likes. They are looking for those comments. With certain, apps that they can like track locations. I just think back to, I'm not even that old, but I think back to like high school and stuff. And like, we didn't know if there was like a party or event we didn't get invited to unless it was talked about Monday morning at school. Now in real time, they're like, all of these people are checked in or, their location is on and they're all at this person's house. And like, I didn't get that invite. So it's like this constant check-in of what is everybody else doing? Am I in the know? Am I getting invited? And if I'm not, what does that mean for me?
So it magnifies that sense of FOMO.
Exactly. Major sense of FOMO. They're constantly then checking in on their phone. So, okay, now everybody's at this person's house. Now I'm going to text everybody or snap everybody and see if I'm going to get a response back and if they're going to be honest with what they're doing and where they are.
So I want to ask you a big question, which let's say for teen girls, is it even possible for them to use social media in a healthy way?
I think it is. So, I did this training earlier in the spring. I'm a level 1 certified provider in tech addiction and digital health. And one thing that resonated with me in this training was the idea that like looking at social media and technology use in terms of like vegetables and candy or like vegetables and junk food. And, I think we saw this a lot during COVID of like, people working from home or kids, doing school virtually, those are vegetables. You need to be, on the screen for those things. But candy or the junk food is that continuous scroll just because you're bored. Or, okay, you found out that there was a party you weren't invited to. Now you're just sitting on different social media platforms waiting for somebody to answer you. Like that's the candy or the junk food. So I think there is a way to be healthy with social media and technology usage. But I think the biggest barrier is getting that buy-in, especially from adolescents, and then also like their parents and caregivers modeling that behavior. And I talk about that so much with the people that I see of like, if the parents are constantly checked in and, if the rule is no phones at the dinner table, but mom or dad are on their phone, how can you expect your teen to follow that same rule?
Right. It really starts with the parents.
Exactly. And even just parents with younger kids, there's various different, like, I wish there was like one set rule out there on like, this is how much screen time for this age that's appropriate. It's varying year by year and, what exactly the screen time is. But kids are plugged in like as toddlers to screens. And, trying to get the parents on board on like, it was very different of like watching a TV that, is multiple feet away and an iPad or, a tablet or a phone that's like right here at their face. And how long are they watching whatever it is? How long are they playing that game? And, from such an early age, that's now a pattern that you've instilled in them. So when they're a teenager trying to change that, it's going to be really difficult.
Yeah, and I really like your analogy of junk food as well, because it's
not mine. It's Dr. Karas's. I'm a doctor.
Credit where credit is due, but I think it's correct, right? It's like Even internally, my co-founders and I are always talking about your information diet. And there is like the question from parents is always how much screen time is too much.
Yeah.
And it's kind of similar to like how many calories, right? And it's like, well, it depends. And it's what is, what's in it, right? So I really like that analogy. I think it sort of illuminates what's at the crux of some of these problems. To that end, what can parents do to start discerning junk food from the I don't know, digital broccoli, like whatever you want to call it, but
The vegetables.
yeah.
Definitely, like you said, like there isn't a one size fit all approach. It's like, again, going back to the pandemic, if you asked me pre-pandemic, should a child be on a screen for 6 hours a day? I would say no. But then the pandemic happened, and for school purposes, they had to be on that screen for 6 hours. So it's, what is the content that they are looking at? Is it educational? Is it a game? I think games are the biggest ones. And even like TV shows and like those streaming services, when we would watch TV, there used to be a start time and an end time. And then you get up and you'd go do something else. Now this idea of like binge watching stuff, there's no end time. So teenagers like, yeah, like this show came out the next season and I just binge watched it. And I'm like, that was 10 hours. Like, and you did it in one day. Like, that is definitely junk food. That is not broccoli. What are they looking at? Are they taking breaks? Is it a screen that is very close to their face? What is their behavior like after? I know some parents say like, after, my young child is on screens, their behavior worsens and they engage a temper tantrum. That's a problem. Like, so then we need to cut back on the screen time. Whether it's X amount of hours a day, what works for you and your child, or you're only allowed to have screens, after homework is done or, after dinner, but not too close to bedtime. Finding what works for the family and finding what the parents can stick to. That's the biggest one. Because once you set that boundary of like, these are the screen limits, you have to be able to be consistent with it. And again, model the behavior. If there's no screens after a certain time, parents shouldn't be on their screens either.
Yeah, and I think there's some recent research out of University of Wisconsin actually that basically validates this. That when it comes to tech habits in particular, I mean, just like everything else, it starts with your role model. So that it makes a lot of sense. For let's say teenagers, adolescents, who maybe they know that they shouldn't have binge watched 8 hours of the latest Stranger Things, or whatever it was. To the point that you made, and I'm just kind of thinking about this now, like it those natural guardrails just don't exist in the same way that they used to. And the content is more and more compelling. You mentioned the screens getting closer to your face. Of course, you have VR, right? Which is like right there. So
you're in it.
With the developing young adolescent mind, it can be very difficult to pull away from it. So what's something, I guess, what would you challenge one of your clients to do to take that first step of being able to make better decisions in the moment?
Yeah. I usually, with my teens especially, I'll usually say like, okay, if you feel like you absolutely need to binge watch something, again, like meeting them where they're at, don't watch it on your phone, don't watch it on your computer or tablet, watch it on a TV screen. So it's at least further away. And after every episode, get up, get a glass of water, get a drink, check in with your family and actually have a conversation with somebody. Or, set, I'm only going to watch 2 or 3 episodes. Depending on the teen, some of them are able to be like, okay, 2 or 3. But a lot of them are like, well, no, because there's 5 more. Right. Okay, but now it's midnight and you have school the next day. So again, that's where like I really try to bring the parents in of like, you need to monitor this. And like teens still should have a bedtime and they should not be on screens, regardless of what type it is, up until bedtime. Another area where there's different research of like an hour to 2 hours before bed, there really shouldn't be any screens. And how many of us are guilty of laying on our pillow and scrolling on our phone or laying in bed and watching TV? It's horrible sleep hygiene. So getting the parents involved of like reinforce this behavior, set a bedtime, go in, shut off the TV, have a conversation with your teenager of like, do you understand why we're setting the limits? Like, we're not trying to be, the big bad person here. It's like, you need sleep in order to function the next day at school or, whatever it is. We're not saying you can't ever watch the show, but like, you can't binge it. Or, you need to not watch it on your phone.
Well, even I just had an interesting conversation with an entrepreneur who was a former esports athlete, like professional gamer. And he even says to his clients who he coaches, and he's got a big focus on mental health now, is, hey, if you want to keep playing the game, you need sleep. You need to like take care of your physical body. Like it's even to have a good time in a virtual space, right? These things are important. So if you want to enjoy that next season of whatever it is, like got to take care of yourself.
Yeah, it's so true.
So social media, very, very difficult to use these platforms in a healthy way, but it sounds like it can be possible. There are also lots of interesting anecdotes around people connecting with communities that they wouldn't be able to connect with locally, where that can provide you with social relationships you wouldn't have had otherwise. And this is a new thing just in sort of the last like generation or two, like making internet friends.
Yes.
I only started doing this like at the beginning of the pandemic, and my now wife still kind of makes fun of me for it, making friends on Twitter. But it is increasingly common. For parents who might be concerned about their kids developing new relationships online, so meeting strangers, whether it's on Twitter or through video games or something like that. How should they think about it? What can they do to make sure that those are healthy relationships?
Yeah, that's a great question. I have so many of my teens that we talk about when they talk about their friends. I'm like, wait, is this a real life friend or is this like somebody that you met online? And that has grown in the past, even like 3 to 5 years, that more and more teens are coming in and saying like, oh, these are my friends like online. And I would say to parents, like, you have to have that internet safety talk with your child sooner rather than later. What information is safe for them to share? How are they knowing this person that they are friending is who this person says that they are? Like, just like you would monitor, like, okay, who's picking you up for this event? Like, I want to meet their parents, are the parents going to be home? Like, you need to monitor who they're talking to, what the conversations are. I've had a couple of teenagers who have wanted to meet their internet friends in person. And I don't knock it down necessarily, but I say, okay, this is a conversation we need to have with your parents. What is their comfort level like? Can they be there with you? I recommend a public place, like all of these things, because you really don't know who this person is. Even if you're meeting them, via video, you know nothing about their home life. You know nothing about their other relationships. So really doing your research before you meet them and just parents monitoring who their kids are talking to.
And just like you said, I mean, this is the same advice you would give to somebody who's operating in reality, right? So
exactly. Yeah. I remember growing up, my father was a cop. So it was like, you're going to this person's house. Have we met them? Have we met their parents? Are their parents going to be home? Like, okay, I'm going to drop you off, but I'm waiting until you get in the door. Like it was, there was checkpoints, and it should be the same, if not more, with online relationships.
And speaking of connecting with folks online, you have been using virtual reality in your practice recently. I'd love to hear about how that's going.
It is going great. So I started using it in the fall, and I initially thought that I would get more kids and teens interested. And although I did, I shockingly had some adults interested in it also, just because they were like, this is so cool. I've never done this before. I would love to try it. So I've had very positive feedback using virtual reality. I actually had an adult of mine who I had been meeting with them for several years. She really enjoys like walk and talk therapy. So, being out in nature. And we actually use through Virgil's one of the rooms where it's like a forest. So we would kind of walk and talk in the forest virtually and, conduct our sessions that way. And she really enjoyed it.
And how did it feel versus using something like Zoom?
It was Interesting, because for so long I was so used to seeing her face to face, and now it was an avatar. But again, like meeting her where she was at, she preferred that like walking piece.
Hmm.
And, after the first couple of sessions where I'm like, okay, like we're continuously walking and I'm necessarily not seeing her face, it was fine.
Well, hopefully we'll put some more exciting environments in your hands soon. Go for a walk and talk in like a Martian forest or something like that. Awesome. Now you, as I said before, you're sort of on the front lines, seeing this what's being referred to as the mental health crisis play out in real time and accelerate, unfortunately, in many cases. What is a mental health topic that is not getting enough attention currently that should be?
I think access to mental health services, especially in the realm of, using technology to our advantage with mental health and the barriers that come with insurance companies. I feel like when people think about mental health, they instantly think, okay, like, does my insurance cover this? And as I had mentioned earlier, when the pandemic happened, there was a lot of pushback from insurance companies. There was a lot of barriers. And I just remember these horror stories from providers who were on insurance panels and they're like, I can't meet with my person and we're in the middle of a pandemic right now. So I think the idea of like affordable mental health care and accessible mental health care is not being talked about, and it absolutely needs to be.
What do you think can be done to increase access?
So from the insurance companies, like paying their mental health providers a decent reimbursement rate. I know personally that's why I never accepted insurance. Like mental health providers go through all of these years of training. We have student loans, and yes, that's not the problem of the people that we see, but in order to provide services, in order to prevent burnout and pay our bills, like we need to get paid a decent wage. So I think people expect like the rates that they see out there are exactly what mental health providers get reimbursed from the insurance company. And that's actually not true at all. So the low reimbursement rates then cause mental health providers to now see 40 people a week, which is not ethical. It's not sustainable, and it's going to cause burnout. And now you have your mental health provider in a mental health crisis.
Yeah. No, that's not good. And that's interesting because you would think the insurance companies would have a financial interest in decreasing those long-term costs. And there's lots of data that shows that mental health, especially for early childhood, those was it adverse childhood events? ACE can lead to all kinds of issues further on. So I'm, curious if you have any thoughts on this, but why do you think it is that it's not obvious to them to change the payment practices?
I think there's probably, there's something, it doesn't work for their interest. It's not in their best interest as the insurance company. If people stay in network with the insurance companies can then dictate to the mental health provider on how many sessions they will allow, how much they're going to reimburse the provider, what diagnoses they're going to reimburse for. And like, there's people making these decisions that, they'll look at a diagnosis and say, nah, we don't like this one. Well, okay, that's what the person has. So what do you mean you're not going to reimburse for this? So I think the insurance companies like control, and it's a way to keep those who are paneled with them under their thumb, unfortunately.
Well, hopefully that changes. I know there are a lot of interesting companies that are, taking venture funding and whatnot to try to break it up and see. So that's kind of on the business model and financial side. You mentioned technology as well. Any thoughts around how technology can make a better mental health care more accessible?
Definitely. Again, like I keep going back to the pandemic, but it's so fresh and it's such a good example of, I'm in New Jersey physically. So when New Jersey went into the stay-at-home order, yes, technically as a mental health provider, I could still see people in person. People didn't want to be seen in person. So it was like, okay, like, what do you want to do? And I had some people stop sessions because they were like, oh, this is only going to be a couple weeks. It's no big deal. And then 2 months into it, I'm like, what do you want to do? You haven't been seen for 2 months and there's no end in sight. So technology allowed people to still get the mental health treatment that they wanted, that they needed. And there's tons of research that shows that it's just as effective as in person.
So more support for remote therapy.
Absolutely. More support for remote. People who even outside of the pandemic, like people who might be homebound for various reasons, like now they have access to mental health providers, or people who live in small communities who maybe don't have access to mental health in those communities can now just hop on a phone call, a video chat, whatever it is, and see somebody now.
Or even go into virtual reality.
Or even go into virtuality and do walk and talk.
Hopefully that does make it more accessible to folks. I want to ask you kind of a fun question, which is, if we look at some of the progress with technology and especially with VR, Apple's working on some stuff and AR, allegedly, we'll see what they announce. It is getting better and better. It's becoming less expensive, more accessible, and there are a lot of good things about it. One thing that I get a little concerned about, and I think is a concern for a lot of parents in particular, is these virtual experiences, virtual worlds, especially when it comes to things like video games, can be so compelling that you do end up 10 hours a day in the headset or in front of a screen, or we're sort of in the metaverse already in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So I would love to hear your thoughts on the case for reality. Why should we value reality in this increasingly digital world?
It's what's there. Like, I'm trying to not use the word reality in the answer. But it is what's there. Like, you can spend, however long you need or want to in a virtual reality space. But at the end of the day, like, that isn't real life. Like, you have to go back to real life. Those relationships, those obligations that you have, it's a nice vacation from it. But it's not realistic to think that you can stay in virtual reality 24/7. And I'm sure there's people who attempt it. There's still so much going on the outside world that you have to somewhat be connected to. Otherwise, you're going to miss out on a whole bunch of stuff that, for better or worse, you're going to miss out on it. So unfortunately, virtual reality is still bad. It's virtual. That's it. There is an endpoint to it.
There is an endpoint. So
there is an endpoint.
Dr. Nikki is on team reality. So that's what I'm hearing.
I am. But going back to the vegetable and candy, virtual reality can be a vegetable. Yeah. It's walking that fine line and not making it a candy.
Right. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. That's a good question to just have, I think, looping on is, am I snacking on, digital Doritos or digital vegetables, right? I'll have to think about that myself. Rest my day today. Perfect. Well, one thing I like to end on is practical tips for parents. We do have a lot of parents who are listening. For a parent who has, let's say, an adolescent who's sort of struggling with screen time, maybe it's not full blown addiction, but it's they're sort of wondering, maybe this is not the best habit. What is the very first step that they can take in the right direction?
I would say just talking to their teen. I think parents forget that piece. Teenagers, they're developing their own personality. They're developing their own sense of self. And most teenagers, the more rules you put on them, the more they're going to push back. So talking to them about your concerns, because, in my own work, when I bring up a concern, especially with technology use with a teen, I'll say how many hours a day do you think would be an appropriate number? And they usually give a very small number. I think the largest I've heard was 5. And I said, okay, let's open up your phone and let's look at your media usage, your technology usage over the past 48 hours. And they're like, oh my God, it was 10 hours. Okay, so that's double what you just told me.
Yeah. So getting them to come to terms with what's actually going on.
Exactly. And that's not me, giving you this idea. That is evidence, fact, right in front of your face of you were on your screen for 10 hours a day. I don't even know how that's possible.
Right. So confront them with reality.
Confront them with reality, and like collaborate with them of like, okay, like this is a problem. So, some parents will, I tell parents don't use the term addiction. It has negative stigma attached to it. So, teens will hear that word and they're going to push back and they're going to get defensive. I'm not an addict. I don't have an addiction. Technically, technology addiction, at least in the newest DSM-5, is not in there. So not using the term addiction, but saying like, this isn't a healthy habit, and let's come up with a game plan. Does that mean that, again, how many hours a day you should be on it? What time frames you should be on it? Do you need to set limits? During COVID, that's what I did for myself on my phone. I was constantly like checking the news and noticed my own anxiety was rising. So I went in and I put a time limit on any social media app that was on my phone. And once that time limit was up, it was up. So I was more mindful about how much time I was spending on it and what I was doing on that app. So setting limits. I've had some teenagers flat out say like, I don't think I can do this. So like at a certain point, I'm going to hand my phone into mom and dad. Usually like towards the end of the night of like, we're close to bedtime, do your bedtime routine, but hand me the phone, because there's no reason the phone should be in the bedroom anyway.
Right. But in those cases, they're coming to the conclusion themselves. And that sounds like a key point.
It's a definite key point, like meeting them where they're at, pushing, but not pushing too much. And I say to them, like, if we come up with a game plan, I say, we're going to try it and see. This game plan we came up with might not work, and we might need to revamp it. We're doing trial and error right now. So let's give it a shot for 2 weeks, and then we'll do a check-in, what's working, what's not working, and we switch it up as needed.
Awesome. I think that's very, very good advice, not just for kids, but for adults too. I think all of us could probably spend a little bit of time reflecting on our tech habits. Unfortunately, there are those tools, like you mentioned, to set screen time limits and things like that. So that is getting better. Dr. Nikki, this was very much a pleasure. Thank you for joining me. Before we part ways, I want to make sure that anybody who wants to connect with you can do so. As I mentioned, you're pretty prolific on social media across Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Is that right?
That is correct. Yep.
Excellent. And what's your handle?
My handle is Vici Psych Care. So I'm not sure if you'll put it at the bottom in comments. But okay, so I won't even spell it out. I usually spell it out. But it is Vici Psych Care is my handle across social media.
And that's Vici I Conquered.
I Conquered. Yep.
Excellent. I love that. So Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And then you are also taking new clients from New Jersey, New York, Florida, and Vermont at vici.psychcare.com. You can get in touch with Dr. Nikki there. I'll put those in the show notes as well. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. It was fun.
Yeah, have you back on soon.
Thanks.
All right.